Not only am I a sprinter, I like to eat, and I'm a knitter.
I'm a fashion design major, and I sew, but in my spare time, I like to take time out to enjoy the finer details of knitting.
Whenever I'm not being Beyonce, I like to knit.
Knitting! Ah! Being an ogre, one of my many layers is knitting.
Being an All-American basketball player doesn't compare to sitting down and knitting a nice scarf.
So when I'm not pretending to be Spider-Man, I use my spidey webs to knit. After a long, hot, sweaty day of drumming on my keyboard, I love to cool down with knitting.
When you're beginning to knit, you first need to select a yarn that you like. Make sure it's a color you enjoy. Then you need to make sure you have at least 2 needles. And for this project, we are using a needle that is the same gauge as our yarn. And we will be using this peach colored yarn. In order to begin knitting, you first have to create a slip knot. To create this slip knot, you need a tail that is about 18 inches long. Wrap the yarn around your forefinger to create an X. The part that is a tail will be underneath the part of the yarn that is attached to the ball. Pick it up by the X and slide the string that is underneath through it. And this is how your slip knot is created. You then want to take your needle and slide it through the knot and pull the strings tightly around the needle itself. You're going to want your ball of yarn to your right side and your tail to the left. During this, keep the needle in your right hand. You will now begin to cast on. To cast on, take the ball of yarn, the string that's attached to the ball of yarn, wrap it around your thumb and forefinger to create an X. Slide the needle under the bottom piece of yarn, pick it up, and then slide it on. Around your thumb and forefinger to make an X. Take the needle and go around the bottom string and pull around your thumb and forefinger and pull. You are going to continue this until you have the number of pieces of yarn casted on for your particular project. Projects all vary. Make sure you either see your instructor or read the pattern before you begin. To begin knitting, you want to make sure all of your individual pieces of yarn that have been casted on are evenly distributed so you can clearly see them. This is your chance to double check that you have the correct number casted on. You want to move your tail out of the way. Switch the needle to your left hand. Slide the section of yarn that you've just casted on towards the end of your needle, but not off. You are going to take your needle, the other needle in your right hand, put it underneath the first section of yarn, slide it underneath the left-handed needle to form an X. Take your string that is attached to the ball of yarn and wrap it clockwise around the right hand needle. You're going to switch the right hand needle over your left needle to form an X. slide it back and up to move that first stitch to the right hand side of your needle. Using your forefinger, you're going to pull it off to switch the stitch from the left needle to the right. Slide the needle under the first stitch that's on the left-handed needle, form an X, wrap it around the bottom needle clockwise, switch it to the front to form an X, slide it back, and then up, and then you will slide the stitch off. Underneath the first stitch, form an X, around the right-handed needle clockwise, switch the X to the front, move the last stitch off the needle to the right-handed one. Make sure you're keeping your tension consistent throughout. Once you get to the last stitch, you're going to do it the same way you've done all of the previous stitches. Wrap it around, take the string and then go clockwise around the bottom needle, and then just slide it off. Your left-handed needle will now be free. Switch it to your right hand, and then your needle with all of your yarn on it will now be in your left hand. This is your opportunity to check to make sure you haven't dropped a stitch, as well as just to see how far your project is actually coming along. As you continue to go, your product you are making will begin to look something like this. It has multiple rows that show the pattern off. Once you are done, or once you get to your last row, you are going to have to cast off. This is how you finish the project. You're going to pick up the first stitch, just as if you were knitting. Take your loose string that is attached to the ball of yarn, wrap it around the bottom needle clockwise, switch the X to the front, push it off, down, and then slide it off. Your right-handed needle should have 2 stitches on it. You're going to pick up the bottom stitch and pull it over the second stitch and take it all the way off the needle. So your right-handed needle will only have 1 stitch on it. Go back to your left-handed needle, wrap your ball of yarn around the right-handed needle, smooth the X to the front, slide it back, up, and then off. Pull your string tight, move your right-handed stitch or the bottom piece of yarn over the top one, pull it back to slide it off. One final time, underneath the first stitch on the left-handed needle, take the piece of yarn, wrap around the right-handed needle clockwise, switch it, move the X to the front, slide it off, then pick up the bottom piece of yarn on the right-handed needle and overlap it with the first piece of yarn on that right-handed needle and drop that stitch. As you are casting off, it will begin to look like a braid or another row. And this is how you are going to finish your project. Once you get to the end, all you have to do is tie a knot